Welcome to The Gut Show. I'm your host, Erin Judge, registered dietitian and founder of Gutivate. I'm also your fellow IBS warrior. Our goal on this side of the internet is to empower those with IBS and digestive disorders to understand their gut better, to have a healthier relationship with their bodies, and to make confident choices to improve their digestive health. During this season, you can expect a conversation around a hot topic related to gut health, digestion, and IBS. As a disclaimer, I am a dietitian, but I am not your dietitian. So everything covered in this episode is meant to be educational and is purely information that you can take back to your healthcare team in order to make the best decisions for you. If you're new here and something just doesn't feel right in your gut, if your symptoms have led you to this podcast, I invite you to start by taking the quiz, What's Your Poop Personality? Your personality type will unveil what your symptoms may mean, what may be causing them, and what you can do about them. This is a free quiz and you can take it today at gutivate.com or find the direct link below in the show notes. While you're going to take the quiz, let's jump into today's episode. Now for a quick word from our sponsors with resources that might support you. Is a gluten-free diet just not cutting it, or maybe not even necessary when it comes to chronic symptoms like bloating, gas, and pain? Research actually shows that in those without celiac disease, it's actually the FODMAP, the carbohydrate fructan in wheat, not gluten, that causes symptoms most often. This means that you may not need a strict gluten-free diet to see symptom relief. And it means that if you are reacting to fructans, there may be more foods in your diet beyond wheat that are causing you symptoms. This includes foods like garlic and onion, and even some fruits and vegetables that can sneak their way into your diet and contribute to those chronic symptoms. You can choose to limit these foods and reduce your overall fructan intake in order to avoid symptoms. You also have the option to break the fructan down using FODZYME, an enzyme blend that targets fructan, lactose, and GOS FODMAPs, and that will help you break these FODMAPs down to then prevent the symptoms. Learn more about FODZYME in the show notes, and you can use the code THEGUTSHOW for 20% off your first order. Did you know that you can now order your own gut health tests without waiting months for a doctor's appointment? Gemelli Biotech offers trusted, science-backed, at-home tests for conditions like SIBO, EMO, ISO, and post-infectious IBS. Their Trio Smart Breath test measures the 3 key gases, hydrogen, methane, and hydrogen sulfide, to detect different forms of microbial overgrowth. As for those with IBS symptoms, IBS Smart is a simple blood test that can confirm post-infectious IBS with clinical accuracy. Validated by the leaders in gut health, these are tests that you can trust and tests that you can take comfortably from your home. So go to getgutanswers.com to find out which tests are right for you and use the code ErinJudge25, all one word, ErinJudge25, to save $25 on your order. And now let's get back to the show. Welcome back to The Gut Show. I'm your host, Erin Judge, and today I'm really excited for a little bonus episode because you've probably heard me talk about FODZYME, this enzyme powder that I put on my food. They've been a sponsor of this podcast season. I talk about them nonstop on social media. I travel with them. You see them all over my page. And I thought it would be fun to bring the founders in the room and have a conversation about what this powder actually is and hear a little bit more about the backstory so that you understand why I love it so much, but also kind of the role that it plays within our small little IBS gut health community, and also some future directions and the exciting things that are coming. So I'm really excited to have Angie, Lou, and David Hatchell. Please let me know how to repronounce your names. Actually, I've never pronounced your last names. So introduce yourself. So David, introduce yourself, and then Angie, introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having us, Erin. Always a pleasure. I'm David. I'm one of the co-founders at QE Biosciences. And yeah, as you said very rightfully, we have as a mission to help people make their food enjoyable, not painful, in as many of those important situations as possible, and be as helpful and useful as possible. Angie?
I'm Angie. I'm David's co-founder at FODZYME. I started this journey as an IBS patient myself. About 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with IBS. And at the time, I didn't even know what a dietitian was. I was just given the low FODMAP diet by my gastroenterologist and told, goodbye, good luck, try this. I think it will probably work for you. And, we can go into this a little bit deeper later, but all the intricacies of the IBS patient journey. But essentially, I went on the journey after, several years of denial and trying everything under the sun in an effort to avoid going on such a restrictive diet. Ultimately, nothing worked. Was desperate enough to go on such a restrictive diet without the help of a dietitian. So it was like it was such a learning curve of like, all the nuances and pitfalls of, what's high FODMAP, what's not, but found that overall it made a big difference clinically speaking. But it just wasn't sustainable for the long term. I was avoiding going out to eat, or I would eat and just suffer the consequences. I spent so much time every day thinking about what am I going to eat, what's in my food, reading labels, and just kind of preparing in advance and like, interrogating waiters and trying to make the food right for me. So a few years ago when, I had this kind of crazy idea of like, what if we can address FODMAPs directly, something like lactate, what lactate did for lactose intolerance, but enzymes that could directly target this family of FODMAPs, so I could have the best of both worlds. And shortly after, met David, who was too humble to describe his previous experiences, and
It's not that
I work
relevant.
in, I mean, this is still very much in this in this field, and with an incredible scientific background as well as in public health. We decided to launch FODZYME, and it's been now a little over 4 years, growing to serve more customers, and here we are.
That's incredible. And I would love to hear your kind of professional backgrounds a little bit, because I do think that that's really interesting, because I think people see this supplement on the market, right? And unfortunately, in today's world, supplements are being created every day, and they're often created by influencers or, people who maybe don't even have really a health backgrounds at all, and kind of just feel like they come out of nowhere and create this supplement. But for you guys, like it's not that you came from like a dietitian background or anything like that. You came from more of a true science creative, in the sense of like understanding the true problem, right? The base problem is we can't digest food. Why? How do we solve it? At the core of breaking down FODMAPs, when we get into what FODZYME actually is, there's a lot of intricacies to like how that problem presents itself, if that makes sense. So I would love to hear your professional backgrounds, and kind of how you brought your training and your experience into the creation of this product.
Well, I think maybe as a start, I would say that neither of us are biologists by training. And to some extent, I think that is an advantage. The reason being, we're not married to a specific technology. We're not biased. Sometimes if you're too much of an expert in a very specific area, you will tend to try to solve every problem with that expertise or that experience or that knowledge. I think Angie and I are pretty T-shaped, or like very sort of, yes, we have scientific backgrounds, but also we're like not super deep into one specific area, and rather more wide thinkers, if that makes sense. And I think that helps reframe the problem we're solving as how can we be most useful to the IBS community, or more largely the community of people that suffer from FODMAP intolerances, and where those intolerances get in the way of a normal day, of an enjoyable day. And then work backwards from that and say, what does a solution need to fulfill? What are the constraints that it needs to be bound to for that to happen? I'm delaying saying what our backgrounds are, but just wanted to provide some context. I can start and say my background has been a little bit all over the place. My undergrad was in mathematics, then I did grad school in computer science and another grad school in epidemiology, with the idea that all of those areas are useful ways of thinking about how to make something useful for a group of people in the health space. Specifically, and before meeting Angie, I had started a company that came out of a graduate school project that was using computer vision to analyze stool. Yes, like taking pictures of poop and analyzing that. That was back in 2018. And there were several challenges, but that was sort of my first introduction to the GI space. And I've learned so much about the IBS community through that project. That company ended up being sold a little later, a couple of years later. And right after that, thanks to that, actually, Angie reached out and we met for that. So
amazing.
Yeah, I've completely forgotten about the first message I sent to David, but he recalls it as apparently I sent him a message saying, so it seems like you know something about poop.
that's right.
And that's how,
exactly
yeah,
right.
that's how we got connected. I mean, actually, just to explore that kind of history a little bit, I remember when I was looking for, someone to work on this with, looking for a co-founder, I was, really demoralized. Just how can I find someone who cares about this space as much as I do? Someone who understands the IBS, patient journey, someone who understands this problem and, wants to, as David mentioned, how can we, conform ourselves, our generalist backgrounds, which lend for a little bit more flexibility to solve this very important issue for this population. My personal background is in physics, but I consider myself very much a generalist as well. My husband is a bioinformatician, so I kind of have that like personal access to, like, he's sort of like an encyclopedia for all things biology. Although now, of course, since the beginning, we've also had internal talent. We have our founding scientist, Dr. Shalaka Samad, who is deep expert in all things biotechnology, not all things, but specifically for enzyme fermentation, what we need. So we make sure that like our backgrounds are this kind of flexible canvas on which we have this fluency, let's call it, to be able to converse with scientists, external partners, organizations who help us achieve what we want to achieve.
Amazing. And did you start or come up with the idea of FODZYME whenever you were still in college? Like, was that something that was kind of a side project that then turned into a company, or was it post-grad? Like, I'm actually not familiar with the starting origin there.
Yeah, for me personally, it was a few years after college. I had the IBS diagnosis. That IBS journey started in college. I remember after dinner, I would have out of the ordinary stomach pains. And it was really quite alarming when you really didn't know what was going on. I went to the University Health Services, and like twice they thought it could be appendicitis. So I was sent to the to the ER, and I think it had to do like a CT scan, which is just super invasive. I had to do it twice and like expose myself to that radiation for this purpose, just because people didn't really understand IBS. It really made the whole undergrad experience for me quite frustrating when dining hall food was really all you had, and every day was kind of like, am I going to feel bad, or do I just deal with it? And I dealt with a lot of the pain and the bloating just going through it.
Yeah. So a few years later, you came up with this idea, and we're going to get into, I want to talk about bringing it to market, like what those initial ideas looked like. But before we get there, taking a bit of a step way forward, what is FODZYME? How would you describe FODZYME and the product that it is today?
There's so many, it depends on for whom we're describing this. But at a high level, FODZYME is a way for you to be able to enjoy food if you're sensitive to certain fruits and vegetables. If you know what we're talking about, then you may be familiar with FODMAPs, and in which case, it's a magic powder that allows you to neutralize in a way those FODMAPs in meals, so that you can enjoy the experience, you can enjoy the rest of the nutritional value of that meal, and the rest of the experience with other humans or anything else you might be doing in life. Yeah, it's a way. I mean, we often say, because of how familiar people are with lactate, we say that this is lactate for FODMAPs, or lactate 3.0, because we contain 3 core enzymes that target most of the FODMAPs that people are sensitive to. Angie, maybe you have an alternative perspective on this.
That's perfect, and definitely it's a different messaging for depending on who's the audience. Definitely, in our early customers were folks who really knew the low FODMAP diet. They've worked with dietitians, they've been on it for years. We've some form of the low FODMAP diet for years. They really know what we're talking about when we say like fructan or galacto-oligosaccharides. And they know the pain very well of restricting and tagging down the waiter and figuring out how to how to get something low FODMAP on from from the kitchen. So they know that experience very well. And as we're growing, we're of course reaching more of we call it FODMAP naive folks who have never, maybe they've heard of the low FODMAP diet, but maybe we're told to go on the low FODMAP diet by their gastroenterologist or PCP, but have never given it a try or just have never heard about this at all. So that is also an interesting kind of communication challenge for us to, how do we, FODMAP already itself, if anyone's, gone through that whole journey, it's not a straightforward concept at all. In fact, it's one of the most complicated kind of diets, like paleo, keto, vegan, like all sorts of things that they're relatively intuitive, whereas FODMAP doesn't have a rhyme or reason. It's like whether there's the presence of these molecules, and they have to be identified in the laboratory, assayed in the laboratory. And of course, that also changes year to year depending on harvest conditions and the varietals and all these nuances. It's like, sorry, that's my whole little like rant on how like complicated that is.
That is a great explanation, in the sense that it is tricky to understand why it's there if you don't know like what you're targeting, but then it's like simplifying it sometimes can help to understand, okay, just add it to food and see what happens, and then understand on a deeper level of like which foods that you are targeting, and all of those pieces when you're using it. It is an enzyme. I think a lot of people don't know truly what enzymes are, right? Because enzymes help break down different molecules. Our body produces enzymes. Some enzymes that we take supplementally are to add to what our body produces. Some are to replace what our body may not be producing well, like lactase for lactose. If you stop producing it, become lactose intolerant. There's also some that we add in that maybe our bodies don't produce, but we can add them because they're created to break down molecules our bodies don't necessarily break down, which we will get into. So with FODZYME, you have lactase that breaks down lactose. You have alpha galactosidase, a version of that to break down like the Gauss beans, things like that. Those two enzymes have been around for a while. Those have been studied,
Yes.
been around for a while. And then you have
Sorry.
your fructan hydrolase, which is unique to FODZYME. So going back to those earlier days and like the early idea, what did you start with? Did you start with like lactase, alpha galactosidase because they were already there? Did you go straight into figuring out how to target fructans? Like, it's getting into like a little bit of the nitty gritty. I'm very curious, like how did that development?
Yeah, I would say it was led by the fructan hypothesis. As someone who's FODMAP sensitive myself, the biggest triggers for me and the hardest to avoid were the garlic, onion, and also to some extent for myself, wheat, which is commonly confused for gluten. The FODMAP, at least we could talk about that a little later if we get there. And it's also been found, which is kind of validating my personal experience. It's been found in medical journals, in clinical studies, that fructan is by far the biggest troublemaker in the FODMAP family. It's the one that's causes more trouble, causes more symptoms compared to let's say fructose or lactose. People who are sensitive to FODMAPs tend to have a lower tolerance threshold to fructan. And it's also just culinarily speaking, the hardest to avoid. Like garlic and onion, until you go on the low FODMAP diet, you don't realize how ubiquitous garlic and onion is. And you take it for granted if you're just eating things. It's like, I don't even think it's that garlicky, but it's always there. It's just, it's something that, humanity has decided, like it generally makes savory food taste good. And most world cuisines like to use it in abundance. I mean, think like Italian food, Mexican food, Chinese food, Mediterranean food, all of that uses like garlic and onion to abundance. So we started with that as like the biggest thing to tackle. Another part of our hypothesis was that, like, for instance, like lactose, while it is definitely a problem, there's so many more replacement products these days, alternatives. Like you could get oat milk for your latte, or almond milk, but there really isn't a good solution for garlic and onion. And even for me personally, like the garlic infused olive oils, it just doesn't, it's not versatile enough for all the food that I would like to eat. So we started with tackling the fructan question, and that was in introducing our novel patent pending fructan hydrolase. And then after that, it was like, of course, alpha galactosidase to cover the beans, legumes, nuts, lactase for the lactose and dairy products.
So for people who aren't familiar with these different FODMAPs and what we're talking about here, fructans, people who are not sensitive still do not break down fructans. Our body does not break down fructans. We do not produce enzymes to break down fructans. That's the reason why many of these foods are considered like prebiotic fibers. They feed gut bacteria. They have a lot of beneficial effects because they're not necessarily broken down fully. But most people who don't have IBS or hypersensitivity or anything to any kind of reaction to these foods, they don't have the same effects in their gut when they don't break them down. Whereas people who do have that sensitivity, they react and they have pain, they may have cramping, they may have bloating, they may have constipation or diarrhea, all of these symptoms related to these foods making their way into their colon, not broken down as fully. So when you were thinking about fructan hydrolase, like I want to highlight this because I think it's easy for people to be like, because a question we get asked, right? And I'm sure you guys get asked this a lot. I get asked this a lot of like, why would I recommend FODZYME over something else? Can I take anything on the market? Or what about these general enzymes over the counter, or, all these different things? And if we're targeting fructan, that didn't exist. There wasn't something that was breaking that down specifically. So how did you target that? Like, did you start with the scientist and they were the ones that came up with the idea first? But since our bodies weren't doing that naturally, how did you come up with fructan hydrolase? And like, did you try other things first? Like, I'm very curious about that kind of specific, discovery, as much as you can share, I'm sure, within, what's secret to your company.
For sure.
But I'm curious because I think it's such a creative way to address fructan. Maybe share what it actually does. And then like, how did you come up with that idea?
Yeah, that's a great question. And maybe it warrants starting with like just a quick primer for the audience on like what enzymes are and how they work. It is one of the commonly kind of asked questions, like what's the difference between an enzyme and a probiotic, or what's the difference between these enzymes and the full spectrum digestive enzymes you see on the market. So for starters, enzymes are they're proteins. They're a subset of proteins. So they're a chain of amino acids. They're not living organisms like probiotics, but they can be inactivated. So the way they're structured, the way they're folded, and the sequence determines their function. And as you digest enzymes like proteins, or there's too low of a pH, or if the temperature is too high, that can deactivate the enzymes, make them less stable. And so they're essentially, think of something just being digested. It's no longer what it was before, so it won't be able to do its function. One good way to think about enzymes in our case, because the whole world of enzymes is very vast. There are enzymes that can put molecules together, and they're, in our case, where we want to break things down. So for our specific enzymes, we can think of them as like molecular scissors that go into, say, the fructan, which is a chain of sugars, or galacto-oligosaccharides as well, and lactose, which is a kind of a two sugar pair. It goes in and it breaks the bonds between the sugars, essentially destroying that enzyme, destroying that molecule as it is. So it's no longer a fructan, and no longer would trigger the symptoms downstream, because the simple sugars will get absorbed, essentially digested for you, and will not. Sorry, I'm not doing a great job of doing that. Let's try to simplify, but essentially we're breaking down the fructan into simple sugars that are absorbed before it reaches the colon, and can trigger symptoms down there. And enzymes are also really vast in their origins. For instance, we know that we produce endogenous enzymes, for instance, lactase, as well as proteases to break down proteins, a whole series of them that are created within our own bodies. They're also present in like fruits and veggies, uncooked before they're denatured, and also, like, for instance, microorganisms create them. And in particular, there's a really fascinating area of biotechnology that's industrial enzymes created from microbial sources. And that's a great way to scale up enzymes for instance, lactase is produced this way, or commercial lactase is produced this way. Commercial alpha-galactosidase, like in lactate and Beano, are produced this way. Essentially, it's kind of like we're taking these microorganisms and feeding them. I might be getting too much into the details, but
I think that this is really helpful because I think, as a consumer, consumers are really smart, and especially in this world, I think and I know you mentioned, you have customers that maybe aren't familiar with what even IBS is or what low FODMAPs are. A lot of people that listen to this channel are very familiar, and they know a lot. They're researching, they're looking into it, and I think it's important to understand how complex some of these things can be, and like what the product itself is actually doing on that deeper level, because it helps differentiate like the different products that you may be considering, or how it might work for you, right? Or how you may implement it into your strategy plan if you were to try it, or how maybe it is different than something you have tried in the past. Like, I think it's really valuable to understand like what some of this complexity of like, what is the actual science behind it? Where is all of this coming from? And why is it actually effective versus just, oh, we'll take these random enzymes and they're going to work for you. It's like, well, it doesn't always work that way. It's important to know what actual enzymes are there and like what they're doing, because if you're pairing them with the wrong foods, that can make a difference of your reaction or what value you're getting out of it. If you're taking enzymes you don't even need, that may depend on the value that you're getting out of it. And so I do enjoy hearing a little bit about like some of the background and like the nitty-gritty details of it all. I think it's really valuable as a consumer, as a practitioner of course, but definitely as a consumer.
Yeah, thanks for offering that perspective.
Now for a quick word from our sponsors with resources that might support you. Are you struggling with bloating, constipation, or diarrhea, and you're still waiting to see your doctor? Take control and get answers with Gemelli Biotech's at-home gut health tests. The Trio Smart Breath Test is the only at-home test that is validated to look for all 3 gases that are associated with microbial overgrowth: hydrogen, methane, and hydrogen sulfide. That means it can detect SIBO, EMO, and ISO in one simple test. It ships right to your door, no appointment needed. You take it and you send it back, then you get answers. If your IBS symptoms started after a stomach bug or food poisoning, it could be post-infectious IBS. The IBS Smart Blood Test is a quick at-home test to help identify it. Fun fact, 1 in 9 people who get food poisoning will end up with post-infectious IBS, and most don't even know they have it. With both of Gemelli Biotech's tests, you'll get clinically backed results in about a week, and you can take them straight to your provider. No waiting, no referrals, just answers. Find out which tests are right for you at getgutanswers.com and use the code AaronJudge25, all one word, AaronJudge25, to save $25 on your order. You can also find all these details in your show notes.
Are you taking a prescription medicine for irritable bowel syndrome with constipation, or IBS-C? If symptoms like constipation, belly pain, and bloating are still bothering you, it may be time to try something different. Ibsrela, tenapanor, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with IBS-C. Ibsrela works differently to relieve the symptoms of IBS-C so that you can focus on what's important to you. Ask your doctor if Ibsrela could be right for you. Do not give Ibsrela to children less than 6 years of age. You should not give Ibsrela to children 6 to less than 18 years. It may harm them. The most common side effect is diarrhea, sometimes severe, and your child could get severe dehydration. Stop taking Ibsrela and call your doctor if you develop severe diarrhea. Do not take Ibsrela if you have a bowel blockage. Tell your doctor if you are pregnant or breastfeeding and about the medicines you take. Other common side effects include swelling or a feeling of fullness or pressure in your abdomen, gas, or dizziness. Learn more at ibsrela.com/PI or call 1-844-IBSRELA and press option 4. Ready to try something different for your IBS-C symptoms? Ask your doctor about Ibsrela.
As someone with IBS-C, I've struggled with symptoms related to food for the majority of my life, specifically FODMAPs. My personal triggers, beans, dairy products, garlic, and onion, would leave me feeling bloated and uncomfortable after meals, especially whenever I was eating out or traveling or living my life outside of my home, which meant I either had to just deal with the symptoms or eat bland, awful food and miss out on experiencing the social interactions and the joy of food. Finding FODZYME was a game changer for me. This is an enzyme blend that targets FODMAPs, specifically the GOS that's found in beans, fructan in the garlic, onion, wheat,
and even different fruits and vegetables, as well as lactose in dairy products. I stash this in my wallet, my husband's wallet, every bag I own. I take it with me everywhere I go so that I can simply sprinkle it on my meals, eat with confidence, and feel my best after. If you want to try FODZYME for yourself, go to FODZYME.com and don't forget to use the code THEGUTSHOW, all one word, THEGUTSHOW, for 20% off your first order.
And now let's get back to the show.
Another way to think, or I guess to build on what Angie is saying, I think one useful way to think about these enzymes, and I think it's important to clarify that there are naturally occurring enzymes and there is also synthetic enzymes. Commercially speaking, it's extremely hard to make a synthetic enzyme compared to a natural enzyme. And that's what you have in FODZYME. The three enzymes that we have in FODZYME are naturally occurring enzymes. And the reason that is because nature has evolved, or microbes have evolved over a very long time to actually be able to break down these, within them produce these enzymes to break down and make use of these FODMAPs as food sources, as carbon sources, essentially. The fact that these fructans are fermenting, having prebiotic effects in your gut, means there is bacteria, there are microbes in your gut that actually possess enzymes that can make use of the fructan in your gut. That's precisely why. So the job here that we have is, how do I identify that naturally occurring enzyme? And then you essentially feed these microbes a bunch of carbon sources. You could, in principle, feed them garlic or fructan to produce these enzymes, because they're essentially evolved to, whenever they detect this sort of fructan in the environment, they will essentially absorb it and produce these enzymes internally. So nature has figured out a solution for this. We are lucky to live in a time where it's relatively feasible to extract those enzymes from within those microbes and turn them into something useful for humans. So maybe that's an additional point of clarification.
Yeah, that's great. I'm just imagining a giant warehouse full of a ton of microbes. You're just feeding and extracting.
It's done in big tanks. It's done in big tanks called fermenters. These are 5,000, 10,000 liter tanks, and essentially it's a broth. It's a broth that you feed with these microbes and a bunch of food, and they do that as a consequence. They produce the enzymes as a consequence.
That's a cool way to think about it, and that helps me. I actually did not know fully that side of it, and I think that helps make sense of it, because I think one question, right, people ask is like, well, why would you add something that's not natural to your food? Or like, why are you adding things on top? And it's like, well, understanding kind of that process of, okay, well, it is naturally occurring. We're just trying to kind of put it into the food at a different part of the process of digestion, right? You're adding it at the beginning versus it happening where symptoms might already be happening and you're having to deal with those repercussions. Like, instead, we can kind of do it at the beginning to avoid it happening later on, or problems down the pipe.
Yes.
Right.
And in fact, one of the common kind of misconceptions from people who are unfamiliar with FODZYME is like, oh, it's a chemical you're putting on top of a food, or it's like a drug. In fact, the microorganisms in question, they're actually microorganisms that have been used in food for more than millennia. So this is stuff used to brew soy sauce. It's been in food for millennia. It's demonstrated to be safe. We're now just at this point in time where we have this, call it a hack of extracting those enzymes at a much quicker and more effective rate, so that we can produce these commercial enzymes that we've identified to be specific for fructan. And what we're offering to folks in the form of FODZYME is essentially that.
Yeah, I think people understand like sourdough bread, right? We know
yes.
that you're familiar with FODMAP, like sourdough bread is lower FODMAP than regular wheat, because that fermentation process, those microbes break down the fructan. So it's like the same thing. You just don't have to eat fermented. Not everything you eat has to be fermented. You kind of bypass that need for like fermentation to the food directly. It's like you have your own fermentation process, extraction, and then we can still break it down without necessarily fermenting everything that we eat.
Which would change the flavor profile. And we're just skipping the microbes, giving you just the enzymes. And in the end, it is the enzymes that the microbes have in the fermentation process that breaks down the FODMAPs.
And it's important to note that if you were going to give microbes, well, one of the side effects of giving microbes is that they produce gas, which is the fermentation gas that you, well, for one, is what you feel. That's the gas that you feel when you eat something like garlic. And you can also see it very clearly in sourdough bread. The reason why you have bubbles inside the bread is that gas as a product of the fermentation. So that is not a desirable way of dealing with fructans. Much more direct and simple and elegant way is enzymes. Easier to measure, easier to dose, easier to control by all means.
One thing, oh, sorry, just to add one thing that I don't know if we've made it explicitly clear is, the other reason why enzymes are so clean is that generally enzymes are very specific, call them scissors. Like fructan hydrolase as scissors, they generally only work on fructan. They're not going to, cut down lactose, for instance. And so we have a very clean set of enzymes. And that also answers the question, what's the difference between FODZYME and these full spectrum digestive enzymes that contain amylase to break down starches or protease to break down proteins, and, also arguably a bunch of enzymes that, have no backing or any kind of solid rationale behind why you want to break down, let's say, cellulose. So in our case, yeah, we have a very specific blend specific to FODMAPs.
And your blend is in a powder form, right? So that's always a question. So I think as we're talking about the way that you're extracting, is that extraction process and the way that you're able to kind of pull that out, is that why it's in a powder form? Like, I know I personally prefer it. I love the powder option. I think it's a lot more doable. I don't like swallowing pills. I also don't want to take in the cellulose of the capsule, like, to that degree. It's like, that to me is just frustrating. So I love the powder option, but I know a lot of people are confused by that, right? Because it's like, well, why do you have to do it that way? Why do we put the powder on the food? Why don't you just take it in a pill form? Like, does it matter? Is there a reason for the powder form based on your extraction method, or is it more the FODMAP targeting that has been shown to be more effective? Like, walk me through where that came into play.
It is more about efficacy. And in principle, you could take this powder and you could put it in a cellulose capsule, and then you have capsule versions of FODZYME. But we were really, convinced early on that the best way to administer it is through powder. Because if you think about it, putting it in a cellulose capsule, cellulose is it's a fiber. It's not meant to be degraded easily, and you're keeping the enzymes, which have to be at the site of the FODMAPs in order to break it down. You're keeping them for as long as possible from what they're supposed to be, for what they're meant to, for the stuff that they're meant to break down. And that obviously affects efficacy. What we've found to be, majorly impactful for the efficacy of these enzymes is distribution. The enzymes have to get around the food, have to be freely moving in the food that you're ingesting in order to get to all the FODMAPs, because there's limited time in your GI tract for the enzymes to work. Eventually, your body is going to break down the enzymes as the proteins they are. They're going to be deactivated. So we want to give it as much of a head start. If you can, that's why we tell our customers, if you can add it to the food and mix it around, that would be even better. If not, just chewing it with the first few bites is enough. It's really a spectrum. I'm not saying that the capsule cannot work at all. It's just going to be a lot less effective, but we want to make sure that we give FODZYME the best chance to work with that extra head start, because all the time really matters, and time starts ticking as it gets into your body and becomes, it will get digested eventually.
Absolutely. And for people who are wondering, because I know that's always a question I get asked, like, well, do you taste it? Does it add a texture or whatever? No, I would say sometimes if I add it to pizza and it's not mixed in, it feels like Parmesan cheese on the roof of your mouth a little bit, but there's no actual big change. It's not a thickener. It's not, doing anything like that. And I know you've mentioned in the past, some people will say it has a sweetness to it. I've never really noticed that, but I think I also like to use it on extremely flavorful food. So if you're not eating just maybe a piece of bread with nothing else on it, you might notice a little bit of something, but for putting it with flavors, it doesn't change those, which is really, again, handy. And I also get asked often about, well, that seems embarrassing to pull out a powder and spread it on your food. And I have used it myself for so long. I don't like attention. filming a video in public, which I will do because I care about people that I'm serving with content. It's extremely, that's embarrassing to me. It's like drawing attention to myself. I've only been asked about my use of FODZYME once from a waiter, and they were just curious what it was. Like, I've never really been asked much about it. I've used it in Michelin star restaurants. I've used it getting pizza in New York. Like, I've used it at home. Like, I've used it in so many different scenarios. I've taken it to friends' houses. Like, I think understanding what tools you may need for yourself and like with the freedom that could be on the other side of it, if it works for you, like it makes a huge difference in how confident you are using it. I personally find that like putting that on my food and mixing it in, to me, it feels better and more intuitive than like putting a pill in my mouth. Everyone is different, but I think that's something that is sort of a misconception as well, like that people care a lot about what you're doing to your own food. Most people just don't care and they're not paying attention, which is great. Also, my husband uses it. So it's really fun to share that. And I always call it my fun little white powder, because it is a white powder and it is kind of funny, to pull out and use, but I think it's really effective. So it's worth it to me. And those little packets, the little travel ones, they fit so nicely into things versus like a pill container. So I have like in my husband's wallet, I'll put it in like my pocket so you can put it in many different places. I have it stashed everywhere. So it is a lot more flexible. So if you are looking at that and you're like, that's the thing that's been holding you back, I would challenge you to maybe give it a try if you feel like it lines up with what you need. So we've covered a lot of what it is. Oh, do you want to share something, David?
I was just going to say that we've talked to. I'm glad you shared that, because it's we make it a very important point to be as close as possible to FODZYME customers, and we've had many dozens, maybe hundreds of conversations around this particular point on like, what happens when I'm doing it in public, and sometimes a hesitance, which is very natural, of course. And what we found is that the sort of the source of that hesitance is more not knowing how to explain it and feeling judged, when you have nothing to be embarrassed about. This is something you're doing for your health and for your improvement of your lifestyle. There's nothing wrong about that. You're not admitting to a shameful weakness or anything like that. And it's also quite rare that people will challenge you. So most people won't care about what you're doing, and those who do, well, if they care about you, they'll be very happy that you're taking care of yourself. Is the way I would think about it.
I agree for sure. And also, I think a lot of people are embarrassed to even ask for substitutions, or embarrassed to ask the waiter what's in the food. Like, it kind of substitute
big time.
that. And that's a
good luck asking a waiter about FODMAPs and them understanding what they are. I don't think we've ever met a single waiter.
No onion.
Yes. Yeah, that doesn't happen.
Yeah. And I do agree. Like I'm very introverted as a personality. Like getting on the internet and talking about poop 8 years ago when I started my practice, that was not necessarily my natural tendency. As a patient, I suffered in silence for a long time. I refused to talk about it because I was so ashamed of the symptoms and the misconceptions around them, and how I feel and all those things. But I've learned as I've gotten older, like the more that you prioritize taking care of yourself, the better you feel. And whenever you feel good, like no one's opinion matters because you feel good. And that's really all that matters. And being able to talk about it with the people, again, that you trust, that you care about, like you can share with them, and they might find value in some of the strategies that you're using and the tools that you have, and the trouble that you encounter. Like I've had so many conversations with people who also have trouble digesting garlic and onion and those rich foods. Like I bring FODZYME and put it like with girls' nights and things, like people find value in it, even if they're not as sensitive or they don't have an IBS diagnosis or whatever it may be. It's important to share that, because a lot of people still think the stat is around 50% of people in the US specifically complain of chronic GI issues. And those are the people that talk about it to their doctor, right? That's documented. That's half of the population, which is a huge deal. Not all of that's FODMAP related, right? But some of it can be. And so it's important to have those conversations. And that does lead us to another point I wanted to get into. So we talked about what it is and, those specifics. And there's more information on that in the show notes. There's FODZYME.com. You guys have those resources that we've been giving you. But one thing I really love about FODZYME is not only did you create a product that is effective and like helpful for the patient population, but you've been centering patients throughout the process. So I would love to hear, Angie, I know you mentioned like some of your personal stories. So I'm sure that a lot of your value of, okay, what do patients need? Are we listening to them? Are we giving them the care that they need as they try this product? Like kind of that responsibility that you hold for patients first, probably comes from your own background, but what has that looked like along the way in how you've centered patients?
We just touched on earlier about how convoluted this FODMAP system is, and for someone just as a newly diagnosed IBS patient, receiving a handout and like, just what do I do with this? Like, how do I even navigate this? Like, where do I even start? It's such a steep learning curve. Having that experience myself, and also we talk to customers all the time, hearing this is a shared common experience amongst us all. It made us think about what is our service, what is our product. On one, the most obvious thing is obviously we have FODZYME as a product, and it's powder to put on your food. But we started the vision with also our service as another piece of that puzzle. We don't want to be just another product that sits on your shelf and like, we sell the product to you and okay, good luck with it. Kind of like, here's the low FODMAP diet, good luck. We want to be there for our customers throughout the whole process, because we know how difficult it is, just to have IBS alone. And then add on top of that, like navigating a whole restrictive diet and all this FODMAP, different FODMAP families, and like, reintroduction and all of that stuff. So we've trained a team in-house. David and I personally trained them to be experts in the product and in the fundamentals, the nuances of low FODMAP diet. And we offer every customer a chance to speak with them, and there's really no limits. We book one-on-one calls for people who need additional help, but essentially we offer new customers and free information session where they jump on a small group call, and they get their questions asked to their heart's content, and get tailored guidance on their lifestyle, their needs, their personal struggles with food. And our team provides that guidance for them as much as they need throughout their whole journey with FODZYME. And that was something we really believed in from the start. And we're doubling down on that and scaling that effort so that we can serve all the customers as we grow.
That's amazing.
I mean,
that is really important. David, what would you add?
I can't emphasize how rare this is. Not to tap ourselves in the shoulder, but yeah, but really emphasize how when we only have a singular focus that is helping people with FODMAP intolerances, like our entire energy and resources is devoted to this patient population and this very specific problem. It's very narrow, right? Like we're not doing anything else. We're like solely focused on this, and like it doesn't end on the product itself. It goes on the experience and the support that we offer. That is very rare. It's very rare to see this, and I just wanted to say that our attention is on that, and like we monitor, we iterate, we improve on that as much as possible. We build technology in addition to the service side of things to also help those participants in, for example, selecting their first meals with FODZYME, which we detected being it was or used to be a point of hesitance and friction. Like, okay, now I got this product, what do I use it on? That was a point of friction, and we try to smooth out that as much as possible. It's a very nebulous journey, as we were talking about, and like there's so many touch points that we can help if we listen to that. And I think that is where, like, it's not just about the biology or the chemistry of what we do. It's like so much more. It's like just be useful to this patient population or to this group of folks, and that mindset carries forward.
I completely agree. I think, like I started the conversation with, there's supplements that come out every single day. There's, in the best way, IBS, gut issues, symptoms, have been at the forefront of the supplement industry and product industry, service industries, where patients have access to so many different options for their care, which is amazing. I don't know how many patients get their hand kind of holded through the process of, how do you actually use this? How do you test to make sure this works for you? What do you do if it doesn't work for you? And are you a failure? No, like even just that encouragement and a bit of guidance to where patients aren't wasting their money on something they're not going to use, or they're not missing out on an opportunity for a strategy to work for them by maybe not using it the way that it could work for them in, you know, the best way, and having that information. I think also patients are getting bombarded by ads from me as well, but we're constantly, you know, recommending things, and it can be hard to know, well, what if it, like, I don't know. And patients are really unsure, or customers can be very unsure, and having that opportunity to like talk to somebody, know that you're using it in the right way, that, you know, you can truly test it. And then with these potential symptoms that are also involved, like knowing, okay, getting a little bit more information so you feel confident in how you utilize it, that is really, really important, and something I love about FODZYME, and I think is really valuable. And I think a lot of customers aren't taking advantage of it. And so if you are listening to this, I know I don't talk about that as often because I'm sharing more of my own experience with it, but that is something you could take advantage of, and you know, make sure if you wanted to try it and you've been considering it, but you're just unsure, like reach out to their team because they exist. So as we are wrapping up, with as much as you can share, what's next? Because I know, Angie, you've got the shirt on, and I didn't even mention this. The company is Kiwi Biosciences, right? It's not FODZYME. FODZYME is one product. FODZYME also doesn't target all the FODMAPs that exist. So what is coming, or what are some of the ideas in the future, if you are able to share anything?
That's a great question, Erin. We have multiple R&D threads in terms of product development or things that we're trying to develop. Again, it's not just about the biology or the chemistry. There's other things that we continuously try to improve and scale, like all the support services, for example. But if your interest is more on the R&D side of things, there's been over the years many R&D projects. The central one has been developing a solution for polyols, which is the PE FODMAPs, a group of FODMAPs that we don't yet target. FODZYME somewhat indirectly helps if someone is sensitive to multiple FODMAPs, and you know, there might be any average meal will have multiple FODMAPs in it, so it will somewhat help indirectly. But it's been quite a non-trivial way to solve this problem of polyols. We've tried many projects over the years. We're working on 2 active projects right now that we feel very confident on. But I just want to emphasize that, you know, this is the risk that one takes with all these research journeys. It's like there is no guarantee that these things will pan out. We've closed many projects that didn't work. We're constantly trying. It is, you know, one of the most important things we can do on the R&D side, and we'll keep trying until we get something that works. And by the way, working doesn't mean, you know, finding an enzyme that does X. That's easy. In fact, we have many candidates that have done this over the years. Doing that in a way that is as easy to use as FODZYME is a difficult part, and where the cost is, for example, non-prohibitive, not prohibitive for us to produce it, and so on and so forth. So there is so many constraints that we have to navigate, but it's definitely a core focus for us.
I think that covers it really well. Yeah, I have nothing to add.
Perfect. Well, that's really exciting, and I look forward to that, whatever that looks like. I know it's exciting to think about all the possibilities of what can come, especially with this approach that you guys have taken, like what could come out of that. So I'm really excited about that. And you know, going back to the mission, right? The whole point here is to allow more flexibility for patients, like, and for customers, allow more freedom with food, allow people to enjoy food, allow people to just live and have some normalcy as much as possible. And so it's exciting to see what other steps can lead to that and keep, I guess, fueling that mission. Thank you guys for being here. Is there anything else you want to share as we officially close this episode down?
I guess one thing that popped into mind as we were talking about like is it embarrassing to use a white powder in public? I know you guys both brought up such important points and in different perspectives to that. I wanted to add that, similar to you, Erin, like it's hard for me to put myself out there as a slightly more introverted personality as well. But, like you, I talk about this as for my livelihood, and pretty much every dinner I go to in a large group setting, if I bring up FODMAPs, IBS, there's at least 20% of that group there who's like, that's me, I resonate. And more people who will say like, oh, my mother has that, or, I know someone like that, or my partner, my spouse suffers from that. So I just wanted to add that, this is such it's something that's not talked about quite enough, not nearly as proportional to the prevalence of this condition. But if you do bring it up, for the most part, people will not be judging you, or it's more going to be curiosity, or even sharing that commonality, sharing that by now it's a pretty human condition of common human condition of suffering from GI conditions, as the statistics reveal. We're just not talking about it enough. And what we have found in our group information sessions is that people really actually enjoy and crave this, I guess, shared vulnerability of meeting another person who deals with the same issues. A lot of the people who join our information sessions, customers who join them, tell us, this is the first time I've really been able to speak about this with another person. So just adding that as another perspective to, using FODZYME, or even talking about these symptoms with other people. It's pretty likely you'll have a sympathetic ear, or at least a curious one.
Absolutely. I could not say that better myself, and I agree 100%. So with that little bit of encouragement, we will close down this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you want to give FODZYME a try for yourself, check out the show notes. FODZYME.com is the website, but you have a little discount code since they were one of our partners for this season. That's in the show notes for you. So check it out. And then through their website, if you have questions or anything, you can connect with their team to make sure that step feels confident for you. So thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on our next episode.
Are you listening to today's episode with the main thought being, what are the steps that I can take to get rid of my symptoms right now? While I hope that the information that we share in every episode of The Gut Show leaves you feeling more empowered and more confident in your body, it's not always going to solve your problem or give you a clear direction for your specific symptoms and your needs. The Master Method membership is an online program for the person with chronic digestive symptoms and IBS who wants step-by-step guidance to understand their body, address the drivers of IBS, reduce symptoms, and build resilience in your gut long-term. This membership includes a step-by-step course and a dietitian-led community that teaches you how to holistically address each symptom and the IBS drivers, how to reduce symptoms more strategically and with confidence, and guidelines for better gut health long-term so that you're not only thinking about today, but you're also improving your outcomes in the future. It is time to ditch the symptoms and get your life back. The membership is your first step. You can learn more and enroll at ibsmastermethod.com and use the code GUTSHOW, GUTSHOW, GUTSHOW for $25 off your enrollment fee.